Hello and welcome back to our study in the book of Job. This program is brought to you each Wednesday night at 7 o'clock p.m. by the Port Huron Church of Christ, located at 756 17th Street, right here in the city of Port Huron. If this is your first time joining us, we want you to know how happy we are to have you along with us. And if you've been following us from the very beginning, we want you to know we really appreciate your support. We want to offer to all of our viewers, whoever you are, the opportunity to come and worship with us on Sunday mornings at 11 o'clock if we lift our heart to our God in praise. So, on last week, we left off with Job sitting in the ashes, scraping himself of his boils with a piece of pottery when his three friends appear and look at their friend. The Bible says when they saw him from afar off, they couldn't believe what they were looking at. They had heard about Job and decided that they were going to come and see about their friend, but what they saw was much worse than they ever imagined. So much so that they didn't even recognize Job. And when they finally realized it was Job, his condition was of such a nature that the Bible said they began to wail aloud, they tore their clothes, and they threw ashes in the air, which is a sign of mourning, and then they sat in total silence with Job for 7 days, not speaking a word. And that's where we left off, and the Bible said they did that because they saw how great his suffering was. Now, the three friends, as we have identified them earlier, is Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. I want to do a little sketch, if I could, on what they are, what they believe, and then look at them individually on how they talk to Job. Then we're going to look at how this section of the book is structured. And lastly, we're going to look at the triangle of tensions, and I'll explain all of that in a few moments. The three friends, when they walked up and saw Job, they were immediately convinced that Job had sinned and had done something that has brought all of this hardship and punishment by God on him. Now, we know better than that. We know the story. We understand what happened to Job between God and Satan, and we understand that God has done none of this to Job. It's all at the hand of Satan. Satan has killed his children. Satan has taken away all of his earthly possessions, and now Satan has attacked his body with these boils that are bringing Job to a place where Job is seeing death as a better alternative than the suffering he's going through. So what I did was I put together a little sketch of what the three friends believe collectively, and we'll go through that and then we'll look at them individually. So the first thing that we want to look at is that they think that or believe that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. I think that's a common viewpoint. And let me just say this before we get started. As we go through this, you may find that you agree with them on some of the things they say, and that's okay. We all agree with it, and I think many of us, you take this first point, and many of us kind of see things this way, that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people, that God punishes us when we do bad, and he rewards us when we do good. This is the thinking of the friends. And you may find that you also are a little confused because you agree with them. This is what makes the book of Job challenging to all of us. Well, let's see what else they believe. They believe that God is holy, righteous, and good, and so do we. And he will not allow his cosmic order to be upset by some self-righteous upstart like Job. What a statement that is. They also believe that on the last day, and how many times have you heard this said, Our good deeds will be weighed against our bad deeds, and God will treat us as our actions deserve. They also believe that there is a place for the wicked, one filled with loneliness, despair, and terror. And we recognize that to be hell or Hades. What's interesting is this statement here, because they believe that it is not possible for bad things to happen to good people. Now that is a big issue with many people. Everyone is asking the question, if God is righteous, if God is just, if God is who he says he is, why does he allow bad things to happen to good people? And if you are feeling that way, then you are in total agreement with the three friends who also says it's not possible for bad things to happen to good people. They believe also that it is not possible for God to find a way to justify the wicked. So basically what he's saying is, once you have sinned in the sight of God, you must be punished. There's no way that God is going to look at you in your sinfulness and say, that's okay that you're doing that. And so they said, no, the wicked must be punished. God cannot do that. So that's the position of the three friends. If you just took everything they said and put it together, don't stop watching now. We still have a long way to go, but you're going to find them repeating this over and over. What I want to do now is introduce to you the three friends and just kind of look at who they are and what they believe individually and how they're going to approach Job, so that when we get into these cycles that I talked about, you'll be able to understand better why they are saying what they're saying and how they are addressing Job in the way they are because of this sketch that we're doing on him. So we're going to start with Eliphaz, and we're going to look at him first. Eliphaz is believed to be the oldest of the three friends. Now, theologians have concluded this primarily because Eliphaz was the very first one to break speech of the three friends. Remember, after 7 days, Job spoke, and that is part of sitting Shiva, is that the mourner has to speak first. No one is permitted to speak before the mourner speaks, and then once he speaks, then the others there that are mourning with him have the right to express their thoughts. And since Eliphaz was the first of the three friends to speak to Job, it's commonly believed that he was the oldest of the three friends. You're going to find that he approaches Job in a very sensitive and mild way in opposition to some of like Zophar, who comes at Job totally different. Eliphaz is trying to be sensitive to Job's situation. The downfall of Eliphaz is he was very legalistic. He believed that God's rule was God's rule as he understood it. God never breaks his rules. There are no exceptions. What you see is what you get. What you did is the reason why you're in the position you're in. There's no other way that this could have happened. There's no other excuse for it. Job, you have sinned, and this is why you are in the position you are in. So that's his legalism speaking here. Let's look at his primary belief. And there it is right there. Job is being punished for his sins. He believes that the righteous do not perish. God never hurts the righteous people, only those that are sin. The wicked alone suffer, and in measure as they have sinned. And that's an interesting point there. Not only are the wicked punished, but God punishes them in varying degrees depending how great their sin. So now if you look at this and give thought to this, they're actually qualifying degrees of sin, which we understand that sin is sin with God. We have a tendency, whether we want to admit it or not, we kind of do the same thing. We look at some sins more serious than other sins, and we do the same thing that they did, but God doesn't do that. He asked the question, can mankind be righteous before God? And here he says, can a man be pure before his maker? Now this is why he said that, what's coming up next. He says, God puts no trust even in his servants. And now he's talking about the angels. And he said, if his angels err, he charges them. He takes care of them. He addresses them, even they. And then he said, if he does that to the angels, how much more to those who dwell in houses of clay? Or, in another way of speaking, how much more to those of us that are human? If God is hard on his angels and he checks them, what do you think is going to come for those of us that are human? And that's where Eliphaz is coming from in his words to Job. Now the second guy that's going to speak is Bildad. And this is what we've learned about Bildad. Bildad is very logical in his approach to Job and the way that this whole situation has taken place. He's going to side a lot with Eliphaz and Zophar, you'll hear that, but he's also very logical at the same time. His primary beliefs are that Job is being tested to receive a greater reward. Now, in that, he's saying it's not only that this is being done to Job by God, but it's for a greater purpose. And we've often heard people say that. So he leans toward divine providence. He insists that God is full of wisdom and mercy. He claims the righteous have their share of prosperity in this life, no less than the wicked. He believes that God is supreme, that one must acknowledge and submit to that supremacy because of God's wisdom. He draws in his conclusionary statements from the wonders of creation and the seasons as a way to see the kindness of God. Now that's what Bildad believes, and that's what he's going to be expressing to Job in his comments to Job. Lastly, we have Zophar. Immediately you're going to find that Zophar comes after Job because he's very hot-headed. He has no patience with Job. He's not going to tiptoe around Job. He's going to come straight at Job with both barrels, and he's going to give it to him. He's believed to be the youngest of the three friends because he spoke last. Now, his primary belief is that Job suffered because of God's arbitrary will. He says God is just, and Job must have done something to offend him. So if God's power is absolute, the righteous are rewarded, the wicked are punished. That's Zophar, right there. He's given it to, and this is how he's going to break this down. Job's predicament is his own fault. Job is in his own mess because of something that he has done. No ifs, ands about it. Case closed. Now, there was another guy that's going to show up later in the cycle. As a matter of fact, he's in the final cycle of speeches. A guy named Elihu. Now, Elihu was believed to be a guy that was standing there listening to all of the discussions between Job and his friends. I want to remind you, as we look into these words of these friends, of their initial purpose for being there was to comfort and support their friend. And the reason why I'm bringing that up here, because if you listen to what I just said about them and their beliefs, as we've gone through the sketches of these three friends, the one thing that's missing in these guys on the level of that it deserves, and Job's going to actually say this, is their compassion. They're looking at this guy, and instead of feeling compassion for their friend, they're judging him, trying to fix him in the eyes of God. Now, their intentions may be well, but their motive may be well, but the way they're going about it makes Job feel very threatened. As a matter of fact, you instantly feel that Job is being attacked by his three friends who have actually come to comfort him. Now, before we go on, let me just say this. I think it's only fair. We have to sometime remember when in moments like this what our true purpose is. We want to be philosophical and theological and have all the answers for what the person is going through. But we have to remember that our sole purpose for being in their presence is to comfort them. Is to help them find a way to gain strength, to go through it, whatever it is, for whatever reason. And when we fail to do that, we find ourselves acting just like these three friends to Job. So instead of comforting him, they just piled on top of him and literally, through their words, they beat him up. Elihu is going to show up. Now, he's listening to all of this, and he has a little bit different approach. Elihu is going to speak to them with words that are more loving that you would expect a friend to do. So his words are going to be like a balm. They're going to ease Job's suffering compared to the strong accusations of his other three friends. He's going to be, as I said, the final speaker to address Job. And he, as I said, was just a bystander who later adds his 2 cents. And in his statements, as he's talking to Job with words of kindness and gentleness, he's also going to express anger at the three friends for the way that they are coming after their friend Job, forgetting, again, as I said, what their purpose was. So Elihu's primary belief is that suffering may be prescribed for the righteous as a protection against greater sin, for moral betterment and warning, to elicit greater trust and dependence on a merciful, compassionate God in the midst of adversity. Now that's what you're going to get from Elihu. Now, as we began this study, I believe it was in the second week, we looked at the structure of the book, and we determined that the book was set up as 2 chapters. Chapters 1 and 2 is a narrative, and then in the middle of the prose is poetry, and that poetry extends from chapter 3 to chapter 42, verse 7. So now this is where the poetry is, and these are where these friends are going to start speaking. So let me show you how that's going to look, what we're headed into. As I said, Job is going to break the silence, and he's going to speak first in chapter 3. After Job speaks, Eliphaz is going to address what Job said. After he addresses Job, Job's going to turn around and reply back to him. After Job does that, Bildad's going to address Job. Job's going to address him. And then lastly, Zophar is going to speak to Job, and Job is going to reply back to him. The second round looks pretty much identical to the first, with the exception of Job, that first speaking of Job. The change comes in the third round. If you'll notice, Eliphaz is going to speak, then Job's going to reply. Bildad is going to speak, Job's going to reply. Now, instead of Zophar speaking, Elihu is going to speak because Zophar is finished. After the second round, we don't hear any more from Zophar. It's Elihu now that's going to speak for 5 chapters, and after which Job is going to reply back to him. That is the speech cycle. That's the structure of the book that you're going to find as we go through this. If it seems redundant, this is why. I wanted you to get a picture of this, so that as we keep saying, now Zophar speaks, now this guy speaks, it's because of a cycle. And when you look at this, I just want to reiterate a point that I just made. When you look at the way that this cycle is, you can see that one after another, they come after Job with these accusatory remarks. This was their friend, but they're not very friendly with him. They're beating on Job. So the next thing that I want to talk to you about is the triangle of tensions. Now, I'm going to explain what this triangle of tensions is, and then you'll look at the graphic of it. This was the work of John H. Walton, who is credited with this triangle of tensions. Now, the triangle represents the balanced equilibrium of Job's life. As long as Job, a righteous man, is prospering, the equilibrium is balanced and everything is stable. Once Job begins suffering, one of the corners of the triangle has to be given up, because something has to speak to why Job is suddenly suffering. He once was, everything was in balance and everything was working well, and now suddenly Job's life has fallen apart. Something of this triangle has gone wrong, and that's what Walton is pointing at. So to get a better understanding, let's look closely at the three corners of the triangle. At the very top, we have God's justice. This justice is that God uses wisdom in ruling the universe. God doesn't make mistakes. He's holy and righteous, and that's God's justice. On the bottom left is the retribution principle, which was the place where all three of the friends argued against Job from. And this principle merely believes that the righteous will prosper and the wicked will suffer. If you do right, God will bless you and prosper you. If you sin and do wrong, you will be punished and suffer. And that's what they believe. And then the final leg of the triangle is Job expressing his righteousness, that he did nothing wrong. So if you look at this triangle and how it works, what you find here are the friends telling Job, we believe in God's holiness and his righteousness and his justice. Therefore, you are not righteous. You have sinned and done something wrong because of what God has done to you. Now, the only way that they could justify what God has done to Job was to say that God is not holy and righteous and fair, that God did something to Job and he was unfair to Job, but they can't see the world being run by that person. So they look at the human, the frail human, and they said, Job, we don't know what it is you did, but you did something to anger God, and therefore you are suffering. The more they blame Job for his condition, the more Job is going to defend his righteousness and say, you guys are wrong. And finally, what we're going to find, which is really kind of surprising, that Job is going to reconsider their position. And then at the end of his speeches, Job is going to begin to question the justice of God. Now, keep in mind, as we go through these discussions, that everyone involved in them are convinced 100% that God is responsible for everything that happened to Job. Not that God gave Satan permission. This is God's will. God decided that this is what is going to happen in Job's life. God did this to Job. Satan had nothing to do, which we know is not the truth. So from that standpoint, you could almost say all of these guys are wrong already. So let's look at chapter 3 and listen to what Job is saying. I didn't really intend, as from the outset, to just read a chapter word for word. But I thought in this case, because Job had such a strong position early on, when his children were killed, when all of this started, The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And then he worshiped. You saw a very strong Job that actually, in many ways, confirmed what God was saying about him being upright and blameless. And now that Job has suffered tremendously in his body, and remember what the Satan said, skin for skin. You mess with him and he'll curse you to your face. And now Satan is getting closer to getting to Job. Remember his purpose. Job was the most upright man in the land. He was blameless in the eyesight of God, and Satan wanted to prove God wrong. And he knew if he could get Job, then what God said about Job was not the truth, and now God is no longer God. And also, that goes along with that, Satan knew that if he could get Job, he could get all of us. Now I'm going to ask you a question before we listen to what Job has to say. Put yourself for a moment in Job's position. It's easy to judge him from where we stand in the comfort of our lives. But what if you were to go home and find out you go to the store and come home and your house is burned to the ground? Everything you own is gone. And you say, man, that's horrible. Where am I going to live? Everything was in my house. I have nothing. But you can still go somewhere and live. Now, what if your children were in the house? You left your 5 children in the care of your 13-year-old, and none of them got out of the house. Now what happens? You see how the picture changes? Now, in addition to losing stuff, you lost your children. Now you're getting closer to where Job is, but you're not there yet. Lastly, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, your body is struck with boils from the crown of your head to the bottom of your feet. Blistering sores, pus coming from these sores, tormenting you day and night. Now you have stepped into Job's shoes. So before we listen to what Job is saying and say, listen to all the whining he's doing, I wanted you to really stop and consider what his life just turned into. Job had it made. He had wealth, he had a wonderful family, he had everything, and it's all gone. All of it. And listen to what he says now in chapter 3. The Bible reads, after this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. He said, may the day of my birth perish, and the night that said, a boy is conceived. That day, may it turn to darkness. May God above not care about it. May no light shine on it. May gloom and utter darkness claim it once more. May a cloud settle over it. May blackness overwhelm it. That night, may thick darkness seize it. May it not be included among the days of the year, nor entered in any of the months. May that night be barren. May no shout of joy be heard in it. May those who curse days curse that day. Those who are ready to rouse Leviathan. May its morning stars become dark. May it wait for daylight in vain, and not see the first rays of dawn. For it did not shut the doors of the womb on me to hide trouble from my eyes. Why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from the womb? Why were there knees to receive me and breasts that I might be nursed? For now I would be lying down in peace. I would be asleep and at rest. And he's talking about dead. With kings and rulers of the earth who built for themselves places now lying in ruins, with princes who had gold, who filled their houses with silver. Or why was I not hidden away in the ground like a stillborn child, like an infant who never saw the light of day? There the wicked cease from turmoil, and there the weary are at rest. Captives also enjoy their ease. They no longer hear the slave driver's shouts. The small and the great are there, and the slaves are freed from their owners. Why is life given to those in misery, and life to the bitter of soul? To those who long for death that does not come, who search for it more than for hidden treasure, who are filled with gladness and rejoice when they reach the grave? Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? For sighing has become my daily food. My groans pour out like water. What I feared has come upon me. What I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, but only turmoil. So what are you saying, Job? I wish that I was never born. Job's life has taken a turn, and Job is at the end of his human wit. He's in pain. His life is more than miserable. He's in total torment, and he's at a place where he just wants to die. It's hard to put ourselves in position to where Job is and to think like Job. But that's what I'm going to ask you to do, because we have come to the end of our time together today. And I would like for you this week, in preparation for next week, as we look at exactly what has taken place in Job's life that brought him to the point to say these things, I want you to think about, reread that chapter 3, and see if you can put yourself in Job's place. And once you do that, then put yourself in the place of the three friends and ask yourself, if I had a friend that was suffering like that, a friend that was going through some kind of horrible situation, what kind of friend would I be? Would I be one that would uplift them and try to help carry them through it? Or would I be one that would accuse them and tell them that it's because of their sin that they're suffering and rub their nose in it? It's a lot to think about, and that's what we get from the book of Job. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I want you to think about these things and be ready next week when we meet again at this very same time to continue our study in the book of Job. Until then, may God's blessings go with you, and may you stay in and stay safe. God bless.